Couple things, and then I'll introduce our speaker here. Do we have any Coasties among us? It's the Coast Guard's anniversary today. The other thing is probably this gentleman's favorite holiday, Joe Fabrizio. It's National Chocolate Chip Cookie Day today, too. Can you believe that? Anyway, we'll get going here. One of the fastest small businesses growing in this country right now are, of course, microbrews and small batch distilleries, and we're lucky to have one right in our backyard, just up Blackburn Road. If you take a left out of the lot and follow Blackburn all the way up there, you'll eventually come to the McLaughlin Distillery. So we have with us today Mr. Jim Plummer. He is the Business Development Manager for McLaughlin Distillery. He's going to talk us through a little bit of how their products are made, which is kind of interesting, how they make bourbons and whiskeys and so forth and so on, a little history of the distillery itself, and then any questions. You kind of want to run it like, if you guys have a question, raise your hand and we'll get questions rather than have him go through everything and then do questions at the end.
Yeah, that sounds good. If anybody's been to the distillery before, I'm sure you know we're very informal, so feel free to put a hand up and we can do question and answer.
All right,
as I'm going along.
I'll let Jim have at it.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Thanks for having us out. Anybody been to the distillery before? Okay, we got a few hands. So we got some fans here. I'll give you a quick little history of myself and then a little bit about the owner, Kim. So I was trained in the culinary field, baking specifically. I worked at Costco and I worked at some other bakeries around the Western PA area, but always had, I always wanted to try distilling for myself. So I kind of bought a little still, was doing stuff like in my backyard, just for family, friends, that kind of stuff, the in-laws, to keep them happy, that kind of thing. And then my wife bought me a tour and tasting at the distillery about 4 years ago, and went down there, did a tour and tasting, got on their email list, and they sent out an email a couple months later that said, we're looking for part-time help. And I was like, I want to do that. That sounds like fun, So I went there, been there going on 3 years, worked 1 day a week and then 2 days a week, and then ended up getting in there full time. And I've done a little bit of everything there, everything from bottling, labeling, making the mash, doing the distilling, running the stills, sales, that all kind of a little bit of everything. Whatever the owner asked me to do. I've even poured cement. Learned how to do that while I was there. Never did that in my life before until I went to work at a distillery, and then we poured some cement a couple different days. So that was kind of fun. But that's just a brief history on myself. I'll tell you a little bit about Kim. So Kim, he is just had his 65th birthday, and he started the distillery when he was 57. So never too late to do something, right? And kind of that stuff. So Kim was born in Potsdam, New York, which is right up on the Canadian border, about 8 hours drive time north of here. Grew up on a dairy farm. Worked that, his whole life growing up. Obviously, farmers, they work hard. When he was old enough, he went into the Marines. He was a Marine in the Marines from 76 to 80. Got out of the Marines, did a couple of things around the country, and then ended up going back to northern New York and started his own dairy farm. He ran that for about 23 years, ended up selling that business, and landed down here in Western PA with the gas well boom about 10, 12 years ago. Was working in that industry, but always had the dream of opening his own distillery. So his parents and grandparents made moonshine and bourbon up in the hills of New York when he was growing up as a child. So that's kind of where he got the knowledge of how to do it from his youth. So he and his son, they found the building that we're in now. They spent about 10 months cleaning it out. It was just a residence. They cleaned it out, gutted it, put a new roof on it, kind of got it ready to go where it would function as a business. And then 2 weeks after he got his last license to be legit to open the distillery, he got permanently laid off out of the gas well industry. So it was kind of like divine intervention, right place, right time. And he'll tell you though, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. The first few years were definitely a struggle. He was kind of just there by himself. He was doing everything. He was doing the mash and running the stills and waiting on customers and building the barrels and doing all of it himself the first year or so. But it has progressed nicely. One of his biggest things is using all natural ingredients, so there's no artificial extracts and preservatives and any of that stuff. And the customers appreciate that, and they enjoy the taste, and I think that's why it has progressed to the point where it is now. So that's just a kind of a brief history of Kim. So the distillery opened legally in 2016. It was February of 2016, so about 7.5 years it's been open. And it has slowly grown to where it is now, and we are in about 140 state stores on the western side of the state. With our bourbon and our vodka and a couple of our flavored moonshines. So we are slowly taking over the state. We're kind of working our way towards Philly, trying to get into state stores and stuff. So I brought a couple things. You guys are more than welcome to come take a look. I don't think we're tasting any of this. I don't think we're allowed. So I know. Yeah. But I brought some of our bourbon. So if you guys want to come check it out, this is a 10-gallon barrel. So that's the biggest barrel that we age in for our customers. Kim does have 5 grandchildren. He has 15-gallon barrels that he filled for them on their birthdays when each one was born, and they're going to open those up on their 21st birthdays. So he is working on that for his grandbabies. But everything we do, our $37.99 bourbon, which is our flagship, we sell more of that than anything else. Everything is aged in a 10-gallon barrel, so it's small craft distillery barrels, rather than the 50-gallon barrels like a lot of companies do.
Can you sell anywhere other than the state store?
We can. So we sell online. We have our own website. We are legally allowed to ship to anywhere in PA, DC, New Hampshire, and then a couple states out west, Nebraska and North Dakota. And the reason for that is most of the other states are in what they call the 3-tier system, and it's hard to kind of get into those other states just because PA is so regulated on what they do. So we hope to eventually be able to get into other states as time goes on. As we grow and more people want us, that's kind of what'll happen. We'll be able to get into other states, but that's where we are currently. And then we go out and do events as well. We can pretty much go set up and sell it, farm markets, whatever.
are the barrels charred inside, and what type of wood?
They are charred. So we get them. So when Kim, when he first opened up, he was building all of his own barrels. He started with the little ones, the 2.5s, and he kind of taught himself how to do that. He didn't learn how to do that from his parents, but he ended up. He built about 400 barrels from the time he started. The first 3-4 years, he was building all his own barrels. The bigger ones, we do buy from a company called the Barrel Mill. They're actually out in Minnesota. And then we do have one company up on the other side of State College. It's called American Cooperage, and they make some 5-gallon barrels and stuff for us as well. But they are charred, so the ones that come in to us, they're already charred, ready to go. All we do is fill them and off you go. And a lot of people will ask, well, why do you use such small barrels? And when he first started, he was using small barrels because he was broke, and that's all he could afford. He's like, it was just, people are like, how'd you know to use those small barrels to get that, that awesome tasting bourbon out of it? And he just said, that's all I could afford. That's what I had to do. And come to find out, using those small barrels increases the volume of the wood, the charred wood, to the amount of spirits you have, and that's what gives it that nice strong flavor. And essentially, those small barrels, they age 4 years. You age them 4 years. That's like a 8 or 10 year aged bourbon in a 50-gallon barrel, kind of equivalent to that. So our mash specifically, and we are kind of one of the rare ones, is all corn. So we're 100% corn. A lot of other people use the rye or use wheat or use barley or whatever you want to do. So our bourbon naturally does have a lot of sweetness to it just from because it's all 100% corn. And a lot of people are kind of like that in this area. So this area, Western PA is mostly known for rye. That's kind of where, the Whiskey Rebellion and all that stuff started here in Western PA. And, if you know any of that history, and that's a long story, that'd be for another class. But a lot of those people moved, from Western PA down into Kentucky and Tennessee, and then, bourbon was kind of, born down there in Bourbon County, Kentucky. That's kind of where that started, and it's, grown anywhere. So you can make bourbon anywhere in the United States. Everybody that's in Kentucky thinks you can only make it in Kentucky. They don't own it. They just kind of started it down there, but. Yeah, so that's kind of a little brief history on that. But any other questions on that stuff? Yeah, go ahead.
The wooden staves has to be made perfectly. How do you do that?
So it's when Kim first started. He said he spent a lot of days laying under the barrels, the leaking barrels, with his mouth open, because when he first started, he wasn't very good at it. So they did leak quite a bit. He said his personal record for laying under a leaking barrel is 3 days. I said you might have woke up 3 days later, but I don't think you were there drinking that for 3 days. It just comes with the experience and time. So the ones now that come in, they are, mathematically machined. They come in and and they're built. They're still all hand built, but they are very well put together. We have maybe 1 out of 200 barrels now that leaks, but it will stop leaking. When you put the distillate, the spirits into it, that wood swells up and it'll seal up any of those cracks that are in there. But it is white oak, that's the other part. So to make bourbon, has to be white oak specifically.
Yeah, how much do you lose by the wood absorbing your product?
Great question. So in the first 6 months, when that first goes in there, is when you're going to lose the most, because it's going to leach into it and saturate that wood. We age for 4 years. We're approaching 5 years now on our 3799. At 5 years, we're at about 15%. The smaller barrels, the 2.5 gallon, they're upwards of 30%. So the smaller the barrel, the more evaporation you lose, because you have more wood, less volume of the spirit. So it kind of goes through. So you have a 50-gallon barrel, you're gonna you might only lose 10%, but you're losing 5 gallons. But so percent-wise, you lose a lot more with the smaller barrel, but volume-wise, the big barrels you're gonna lose 5 gallons in 4 years. Yeah, who have?
You ever distill
distill scotch?
We have not. So Scotch is just, it has to be made in Scotland. You can't actually make Scotch here. It is, it's kind of like bourbon. You only make bourbon in the United States. You can only make Scotch in Scotland. Now, the barrels that they use for Scotch, 90% of those come from the United States. They are actually used bourbon barrels from Jack Daniels and Jim Beam and the big companies. That's where they ship them all. Because for bourbon, you can only use that barrel one time. That's kind of one of those stipulations. Yeah, it's a single use only. So, bourbon, kind of the rules for bourbon is it has to be at least 51% corn. It has to be in a single-use charred white oak barrel. It has to be made in the United States, and then when it goes into the barrel, it needs to go into the barrel at 125 proof. So when it comes out, that's when you have the options to drop it down some. Yes, sir. So we do make whiskey. We make a whiskey called Grandma's Rocking Chair, and that was a tribute to Kim's grandmother, who always had a little bottle of shine on her rocking chair, rocking. That's where that name came from. So he grew up with that, and kind of saw that, and that's where our whiskey, the name, was born. So even though it's the exact same distillate, going into the exact same corn liquor going into the barrel's used, so then you can't call it bourbon, you have to call it whiskey. So that's another one of those rules.
Could you walk us through the process of getting the mash to distill?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so what we do, we take cracked corn. It's essentially just field corn. It's a number 2 crack, so it's a very coarse crack. We'll put 50 pounds into a stainless steel barrel. We add boiling water to it. That boiling water cooks the corn and causes the starch to release out of it, and it'll get real thick, kind of like an oatmeal or a grits. And then we add water to that and drop that temperature and convert that starch into a sugar. So we kind of do all that on day 1. On day 2, we come in the morning, we will pitch our yeast into it. The yeast consumes all that liquid corn sugar that's in there, and then a few different things happen. You get a little carbon dioxide out of it. That's your gas and your bubbles. You'll get some heat, and then the last thing you get is alcohol. So we ferment that for 4 days. At the end of 4 days, we separate all the corn out of it, and a local farmer comes and picks it up and feeds it back to his cows. So it goes full circle. There's no waste with it. And we got happy cows, right? Yeah. And then at that point, we load it into our still and turn it on and heat it up and let that alcohol vaporize and come up through the stills. But go ahead.
Years ago, I visited the Bourbon Trail in Kentucky, learned a lot about bourbon, most of which I've forgotten, of course, by now. But at one time, there were just a few states where bourbon years ago was made. Now I believe it's 49 or 50 states because of the individual small batch. My question is, with bourbon, there's certain restrictions about the charred barrel, the amount of aging, the amount of corn must be in it. How and who regulates that in 48, 49 different states?
So it was originally, they called it the bourbon barons, and that was done in the early 1900s. They kind of set what those parameters were, and you have to meet those parameters in order to do that. Now they have even tighter restrictions. There's a bourbon, they call it bottled in bond, and that means it has to go into like the government housed buildings where they keep tight regulations on it, and it's only barreled at 100 proof rather than 125. So those options are out there, but to answer your question, if it doesn't taste good, people are gonna know. It's like, if you taste something, you only have it in a barrel for a year, people are gonna know. It's like, oh, that's not, that's a whiskey. So soon as a corn liquor or a moonshine, whatever you want to call it, soon as it goes into a barrel, technically you can call it a whiskey. So as soon as that touches a barrel, whether the barrel's charred or not, it's technically a whiskey. So you can make a whiskey in a day. You can put it in it for 1 day, dump it out, and then they'll call that white dog or white whiskey, that kind of stuff. But white lightning, yeah, same idea. But
A lot of honor systems
A lot of it is. So anything that's aged under 4 years, you have to put on an age statement. You have to say, this has been aged for 30 months or 36 months or whatever it is. But that's kind of one of the rules too. Now, do people follow that? I can't say for everybody else. I don't really know. But that's what it's supposed to be. But if you haven't aged it, if you haven't given it that time in that barrel to smooth out, it's not going to be great. You know, it's not going to be as good. It'll still be okay, but people will know. They just won't buy it. You know, because bourbon does demand a little higher cost because you're only using that barrel one time. You know, and that's what drives the cost of bourbon. Yes, sir.
Does your licensing company, the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board, do they oversee you?
They do to some extent, but the ATF is actually who controls like all of our labels and the proof and the percent of alcohol and all that kind of stuff. Like anytime we make a new product, everything has to be approved by the ATF.
Now, can you make direct sales to restaurants and hotels and bars?
We can. They are not allowed to just turn around and sell our stuff, though. But they can buy our stuff and make drinks out of it. They're allowed to make a cocktail using our stuff. But they couldn't come in, buy our bottle of bourbon, and go turn around and sell it for $100. That is actually illegal.
Now, last Sunday they had a big article about the wine industry in the paper, in the Post-Gazette,
Okay.
talking about all the licensing fees, distribution fees, everything. Are you required to do that when you ship stuff out of the state?
We have to pay taxes to those other states. So when we ship stuff to New Hampshire, once a quarter, we have to keep track of all that, and we have to send a check to New Hampshire to pay the taxes. They got to pay the sales tax type stuff. So we do, and that's all pretty tightly regulated as well.
Now, you have a special license through the state to make this bourbon and the whiskey?
Yeah, so you basically have to get your limited. What we have is a limited distiller's license. So you can get an unlimited one. The unlimited distiller's license it's $5,000 a year, and you can make as many gallons of proof liquor, meaning 190 proof liquor that you want to. With a limited license, it's $1,500 a year, and you can make up to 100,000 gallons. Right now, we're at about 3,500 gallons a year is what we produce at our place. So we got a little room to grow before we have to get that full license. Yeah.
You said you sell in Pennsylvania. Do you sell the individual stores, or do you have to go to some place where they...
The state stores, it's distribution. So we actually have to drive them to their distribution center, and then they distribute it to the stores. We don't have to go to each individual store.
How many distribution centers in Pennsylvania?
So there's one just up on the other side of Robinson. That's where we go to. I'm sure there's several more. The online one, because our stuff's available online through the Fine Wine Good Spirits website. For the online one, we have to drive it all the way to Philadelphia, because that's where their distribution center is. I know, right? For the online, it's, you know who does it? It's Kim. Kim, he drives it himself. He does. He likes, because it's like, hey, you got a pallet of bourbon. That's like 25. That's like 25 grand. He doesn't trust anybody else to do it, Yeah. But yeah, it's a 6-hour ride. He has to go out there, and they're usually pretty good about it. When they get it, they're usually ordering 50 cases, and it's like 10 cases of vodka, 10 cases of bourbon, a little bit of everything. So, but yeah. Yes, sir.
How do you make vodka?
So our vodka, it's still made from corn, same exact base. The stipulations for vodka is it has to come off the still at 190 proof, and then you have to charcoal filter it. That's really the only stipulations. But vodka can be made from anything. Most people commonly think it's made from potatoes, because I think that's what most of it was, coming from Russia, because they could grow potatoes easier than corn over there when it's cold. But vodka, you can make it from fruit or grain or potatoes, pretty much whatever you want to ferment and then run through a still. You can call it vodka. So the industry standard is 3 times distilled. We run ours through 7 times. So it cleans it up, and every time we run it through, we take the first gallon that comes out and we throw that out, because that's what's going to have any trace of a methanol in it. And the methanol vaporizes first. That's the stuff you don't want to drink. Not that it would, everyone says, oh, you drink that, you'll go blind, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like the old wives' tale. Your body would not let you drink enough to go blind. It's coming back out before you get that far. Your stomach would not let you do it. Yeah, that comes off first, and then we literally use that for weed killer. Yeah, no kidding. That's how we do it. We throw it out when that's why you come up right around the building. We got flowers and stuff, but you won't see a bunch of random weeds, because that's what we use, that methanol. That first gallon that comes off, we throw it out. So, yes, sir.
Do you have a favorite drink?
So I was a corn liquor fan. Like I told you, I kind of was making my own stuff for a few years before I came to the distillery. I just like to take my own corn liquor and put honey in it. So I got beehives on my property. One of my buddies has his own apiary, and I just like honey and a little shine, put the jar in the freezer, and just have a little sip on that. That's kind of like my favorite thing. I never was a fan of any, say brown liquor, bourbon, or whiskey, because, when I was growing up in my younger days, I thought it was like Jack Daniels and Jim Beam. I thought that was the options because they're the most marketed stuff, and I never drank brown liquor at all, just because I was like, it's terrible. I was not a fan of it. But then I came down and did that tour, and I tasted the bourbon that we have here, and I was like, oh, this is actually good. I was quite surprised. So it was, 25 years, I never drank any of that stuff, and here I am in my mid-40s. I just started to sip on some bourbon. So.
I got to tell you a little story. Several years ago, neighbors down the street, we get together maybe 3 or 4 times a year in the summertime. And we're getting together, and Clay had a bottle of that stuff ready to go. And he started drinking it, and he ended up with a very rowdy crowd. We started talking politics in the middle of this.
Okay, oh boy, yeah.
And now when we have it, there's a big sign, no politics. The bottle just kind of dissipated.
Yeah. Just evaporated,
and
huh?
my wife's blaming me, okay? I says, no, I had this much ice in there. It wasn't me. I said, okay, well, we'll go up to McLaughlin. I'm going to go get him a new bottle. I didn't realize at the time it was $75 a bottle.
Yeah.
So I went up there, got a bottle, got one for me that is still, I'm real nervous about opening anything unexpected. We'll just look at it. Took it back to Clay, and he grabbed it with his hands, and he started to cry. Because he says, it was for my bourbon club, and we drank it all. But that was just amazing.
Yeah.
It was really good stuff.
Thank you, appreciate
Really
it.
good stuff.
I've seen you have tours and show you how to do stuff. We look online to see when they have those.
Yeah, we do the tour. We do the tours 7 days a week. It's $20, and that covers 2 people. I can actually show. I brought some of the cards along. We have vouchers for them, so you can kind of see what they look like. But we do those 7 days a week. They usually start at about 12:30, and we run them every hour and 15 minutes. So any day of the week you want to stop up, we can do tours and tastings. But you do want to schedule them ahead of time. But yeah, you do it online. You can pop in, and that includes tasting. You come in, taste a few things, and then we take you around, and pretty much like kind of a lot of the stuff I just said, we kind of take you around and show you that stuff, but you get to see it for yourself rather than just hear it. So, yes, sir.
Your 100% corn made bourbon kind of surprised me. It's almost twice the minimum.
Right.
Is that unusual as bourbons go?
It is pretty unusual, and the reason for that, it came back to along the lines that when Kim first started, he just didn't have any money, and corn was the least expensive way to go, and that's really why he did it. So it's corn, and then we use a maize, which is what they call, it's like a flaked corn, to convert that starch into a sugar. But that's how he got started, and people have liked it, and so he hasn't changed it. He just kept it. He has thrown around the idea of doing a rye. but it's like, you know, it's a whole different mash. You got to change out and do a whole different mash process, and it would just, he's like, it almost be more trouble than it's worth. A lot of other places around here, like Liberty Pole and the place down the strip, they make rye, and he's like, just let them do the rye. We'll stick with the bourbon.
Do they put rye, wheat in there?
Yeah, rye, and they'll use barley. Just kind of changes the flavor. So the rye has a much more bitey, a lot more like spice. There's a lot of people use different words for it, but doesn't have the smoothness of the corn for sure. Absolutely, and I think that's what drew me into that because I like a little touch of the sweet tooth. You know what I mean? Yeah.
What do you charge for bourbon and whiskey?
So our bourbon, so we have a couple different bourbons. We have the 3799, which is aged in a 10-gallon barrel. That one's it ends up about $75 a bottle. And then we have a baby barrel bourbon, which is aged in a 2.5-gallon barrel, much smaller barrel. It has even more of that rich, buttery kind of flavor, more of that char. That one's $99 a bottle for that one. So that's the two bourbons we have. And then we have several whiskeys as well. So we have over, I think we're at 41 products right now. So we have 21 flavored moonshines, which is like the root beer. And that's what this is the root beer moonshine. This is what I talked the owner into making this one. It took me 1.5 years of bugging him, and he ended up sticking my face on the label. Just so he did that so I would stop bugging him. He's like, now you won't bother me anymore. And I said, on the contrary, I have a lot of other ideas. So we're still working on that though. But yeah, and the moonshines run $29.99, and those are going to be 40 proof. Our bourbons are 90 proof. So, and then we have straight corn liquor, and then we have, like I said, 21 different flavors of moonshine. You know, we have a strawberry peach, we got lemonade, pink lemonade, cranberry. I mean, we have orange. We have quite a different options up there.
I've had a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
Taste it all. Like a down grape and chocolate and, I mean, just, you know, the hokey pokey and the other one.
Have you had the limoncello?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. We make so we about 2 years ago we started making creamy spirits. So we have a creamy limoncello, we have a bourbon cream, and then we also have a butter pecancello that just tastes like, we keep it in the freezer. It's like a liquid butter pecan ice cream. Pretty tasty.
Keep those in the refrigerator.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, keep them chilled. But so moonshine is that's your corn liquor. So that's the first time it comes out of the still. That's basically your moonshine. So moonshine is just a generic term. It was coined, you know, back in, you know, Prohibition and stuff when it was illegal, because it would be outside at night under the light of the moon. Thus came moonshine. So moonshine can, you know, it can be made. It's kind of like vodka. It can be made from anything. It's just the idea of you know, fermenting something and distilling it. So, but we do it legally. So that's pretty much what happened is you know, the government knew that people were going to keep doing it. So they're like, you know what, we'll make it legal. We'll charge you a license fee, and now they got their money. So that's kind of how that stuff works. So.
Would that be called Everclear if it comes off?
Yeah, Everclear, White Lightning, corn liquor. I mean, there's a bunch of different names for it, but yeah, it comes out. It is crystal clear when it comes out. So like I was telling you guys a little bit, the methanol comes out first because it vaporizes at a lower temperature, about 170 degrees. So we let that run through, and then the still gets up to about 180, and that's when your good corn liquor starts coming out. So roughly from 180 to 190, 92 degrees is when you get the hearts, what they call the sweetest, the best part of the run. And then at the end you have what they call the tails. Some distilleries will actually still use that, and they'll use that and flavor it so to kind of cover up any off tastes that might be in there. That's not something we do. Yes, sir. So we got the owner, and then we have 5 of us that are full-time, and then we have 10 part-time. So those part-timers are we have probably 5 or 6 of them that may work one day a week, one day every other week. They're, stay-at-home moms, or they have full-time jobs and they just want to pick up a day, here or there, doing that kind of stuff. So, and that's, one of Kim's biggest things is he, loves support local, buy local, that kind of stuff. Like our corn is actually, it comes from a farm actually just over the Ohio line. He's been getting the corn from the same farm the whole time. And then our bottles we get from a place down in Monaca. It's called Stozel. It used to be called Anchor Hawking years ago, yeah. So we buy our bottles local. So we try and do as much local stuff as we can, because that's one of his big things.
Aging stops once it gets in the bottle, right?
Once it's in the bottle, will not age. Yeah, you won't pick up any more char or anything like that. Now they talk about, you might have heard somebody say, oh, it's the neck pour, and out of the bottle, what they say is like once you open it up and it kind of the oxygen gets to it, it may change the flavor. I've never really kind of experienced that, but some people, maybe I don't have that good of a taste of. Sense of taste and smell, I'm not sure, but I'm not one of those people, if you've heard, like the wine tastings where they're picking up all those flavors, and same with the bourbons, we're like, oh, I taste cinnamon and nutmeg and all that stuff. That's not me. So you'd have to get somebody else to help you with that. Yeah, it's for me. So, but maybe you start learning lots of things. Oh, I taste all kinds of stuff, huh? Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of everything I got. Just a brief history of it. I'd welcome you guys to come up and take a look anytime. We do weekly specials on every week. We kind of do different sales on stuff. So the root beer moonshine's actually on sale. Today's the last day for it. He actually put it on sale for $9.99 a bottle. So if you're looking for a nice little gift or something, stop up, pick a bottle up for you and for some friends.
How do you infuse those different flavors, like with the root beer?
So the root beer, we actually found a company. It's called Nature's Flavors, and that's actually a syrup. It's actually a root beer syrup. So it's pressed from sarsaparilla and sassafras, basically, to give you that nice full flavor. The other ones, a lot of the other ones, like the peach, we actually use Simply brand juices. So we go right over to Shop and Save over towards Babcock there, and that's where we buy our juices, and we just mix that with the corn liquor and throw a little distilled water into it to cut the proof. But yeah, it's pretty easy to mix kind of whatever you want to with it. But it's all done after distillation, so everything's afterwards.
How do you, I've never been a bourbon drinker, but what are the subtleties between a bourbon and a Scotch whiskey, or are they two different animals?
They're two different animals. Usually Scotch is a lot smokier or peatier, they call it. It has more of a, it's usually not as smooth, not as buttery, not as much of a rich flavor because it's a used barrel. You're just not getting as much of that char kind of flavor with the Scotches, but they add stuff to them to make them very smoky. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Distilling, you're making alcohol as a craft, even beer. Are there any universities that actually teach or have advanced degrees in what you're doing?
I know they have places that will teach you how to make mead and beer and that kind of stuff. I don't know that there is for whiskey or bourbon. I would have to look that up. That's a good question. I don't. Yeah, that's a good one there.
The chemistry and everything else is what,
Yeah, and that's, when I first started, I bought my little still. It was a water distiller. That's what it was called. And I actually owned it for a year before I used it because I was afraid I was going to blow up my house or something like that. I didn't really know. But I spent a full year of just kind of reading random books and stuff. So there's a book by a guy named Ian Smiley, and it's basically gives you can find it on Amazon. It gives you all the basics of how to make a corn liquor, essentially. Yes, sir.
Where do you advertise your sales and your products? Sewickley Herald, or
Everything we do right now is either through our website or through all the social media stuff, all that kind of stuff. But email list is kind of one of the biggest things. We have about 35,000 people, I think, almost 35,000 people on our email list. So we're doing a special. We send it out, and we just kind of slowly build more and more people. We'd go do, like pop-up tents down at the Strip District and that, and we just meet new people every week and kind of get started, give out samples. Yes, sir.
Given the fact that of any of the products, it's mostly water, how do you make sure that source, like we've got this boil only and ambush on, where do you source your water to make sure that it doesn't get contaminated?
So everything that we do is from a well, anything that's before distillation is done right from our well, which is only 35 feet deep. It's up on the property, so it's basically a spring, essentially. But when you do that, you're essentially boiling. That's what you're doing when you distill it. You put it into you make the mash, it ferments, and you take that and you put it into the still, and you're heating it up and essentially kind of boiling it that way.
So
But
any microorganisms get killed at that point?
yeah, when that comes out of there, so our corn liquor comes out at 187 proof. It's about 93 to 94% alcohol. So your basic, hand sanitizer that you buy is 70% alcohol. So it comes out of there at 93%. So trust me, it's sanitized, whatever's coming out of there. And we did sanitizer, when the pandemic, when all that stuff was going on, at the request of some local, like the local police department, and Kim made 500 bottles of it. He sold 200 and donated 300. So he's donating them to the fire department, police department, just to help them out. They sold it for like $10, but it was essentially, it's 70% alcohol, and then you have to put something in it to make it taste bad, because there unfortunately are some people that don't handle alcohol properly and would try and drink it if you didn't put that chemical in there to give it a bad taste. But when you buy hand sanitizer, or those gels, they're usually about 70% alcohol.
I don't care what you say, I'm not using good bourbon for hand sanitizer. Are you ready for this?
I'll tell you a quick funny story. So this past winter, I was on the way to work and I ran out of windshield washer fluid in my truck. Yeah. So that first gallon I told you about that we throw out, like the methanol to kill the weeds and stuff, I put that in my windshield washer fluid. The best windshield washer fluid I have ever had. It melted. There was no ice stick. It melted everything. It was
Another product
perfect.
line.
Oh, it was great.
Hey. Yeah. All right.
Good so far.
All right, lads, we're going to school. Bryant University up in New England has a distilling certificate or course, also the American Distilling Institute, but here's the other one. Other colleges and universities that offer brewing and distilling certification programs. Auburn University.
South.
California State Polytechnic University, Cal Poly Pomona. San Diego State, University of California, San Diego. Place called Regis University, Sewickley Institute of Technology, Central Michigan University, and there's a bunch more too. So
yeah. So
yeah.
Let's go to
school.
2021, we actually had a gentleman that came and worked part-time for us while he was finishing up at school. He was at Carnegie Mellon, and he was going to school for chemical engineering, and he came to work with us just because he wanted to see real-world application of distillation and that kind of stuff, because they do a lot of that stuff in medical fields and whatnot. So he actually worked with us for about 6 months. He didn't bring any knowledge that we didn't know, but it was cool that here's this guy from Carnegie Mellon, and incredibly intelligent. You could ask him any question about anything, and he pretty much knew all the answers, but he had no common sense. So it's like he brought me the tape gun one day, and he's like, "How do you put the tape on this thing?" And I said, "You're messing with me, right?" And he's like, "No, I never used one before." I was like, "Okay, all right, yeah, it's just like this." But yes, sir.
I understand there's a huge market for high-end bourbons over in Asia, like Japan and China.
I have heard that as well, yeah.
Have you guys, on your website, have you drawn any interest from overseas markets?
Not yet, no. I don't know. I think we're just kind of small potatoes when it comes to that kind of thing. I mean, there's people that live 5 miles from us that have never heard of us. I mean, how many people live within 10 miles here that are in here today that may have not that haven't heard of us? You know what I mean? So I don't think anybody over there is worrying about us yet.
Based on the quality you have, not that you need that market, but.
Right. We do have people that contact us weekly, and they'll be from, pick any state, anywhere. How do I get someone brought me a bottle, and I'm in Texas, how can I get a bottle? You're going to have to drive up here and get it, or something, or have a friend ship it to you. So legally we can't, but we do have people that come in and they're saying, I'm sending this to Texas, and we're like, thank you, sir. All right, off it goes, So, but yeah, legally, you're not allowed to ship alcohol, through UPS. But you have to get a license to do that as well. So we ship through UPS specifically, but that's got to all be licensed and regulated as well. Yep. But I have heard that. Yeah, I think it's the exact same thing. I don't know. Are they calling it bourbon? Because I've heard some people say that before, but. Well, they better be careful, because.
Probably rice, too.
Yeah, that could be, yeah. But, yes, sir.
With all this mash and everything that you make the fluid, the alcohol from and everything, do you have waste?
What we have is, so the corn, like I said, we take that out, feed it to the cows. The slurry, what they call it's the leftover. After you run the still and all that slurry comes out, the farmer actually comes and picks that up in a tanker truck and takes that out to his farm and spreads it on the fields. So it's just essentially fertilizer. So yeah, we don't have any waste at all. And now we used to have, we had drilled a second well because they were using well water to chill the stills, to bring that hot vapor back down, to condense it back into the moonshine. And we now have a system that runs with glycol. It's a closed system and circulates in and out and comes out, goes into the condenser cold, chills it down, and circulates back through, so we don't have any water waste anymore either, which is nice. Yes, sir.
Does the farmer pay you, or do you pay the farmer?
It's a mutual agreement. He's happy to have the corn to feed his cows, and then he takes the slurry and spreads it on his field. So we don't pay each other. He does actually bring us steaks though every once in a while, which is nice. But yeah, it doesn't. It's a win-win for us. He gets feed for his cows because we go through about 300 pounds of corn per day. Yeah, so he's got 50 head of cattle out there, and he mixes it with with their normal hay and regular stuff, because you wouldn't want to feed them all that, because it'd be too much protein. Yeah, that'd be too much. But yes, sir.
I have a story that'll break your heart.
Okay.
I had an uncle. He has since passed away, but we used to go to the Steeler games together. And he said, "You know how I stay warm during the games?" He said, "I put a little bit of whiskey on my nose and on my ears. And then after the game, when you bring me home," he said, "I soak my feet in whiskey." And oh, okay. So he invited me in. He said, "I want to show you. I made a liquor cabinet out of an end table. Come and see it." So he showed me. And I see a bottle of PM and a bottle of Crown Royal. And I said, "Uncle Stanley, you soak your feet in the PM and you drink the Crown Royal, right?" He says, "Oh no, I soak it in Crown Royal. Nothing but the best."
Very good. Yes.
How would you how would you measure your product against some of the products coming out of Kentucky, bourbon in there? I know that you got a small cask process, but is there anything else that you're doing to make your product smoother or better product?
I think, the best example of that is when we have people, from Kentucky that come up and they'll be like, "Well, I'm from Kentucky and we make bourbon in Kentucky." And we're like, "Okay, great. why don't you try ours, you know? And then they buy a few bottles and they leave with it. And that's kind of the best indicator to us that is, we are, you know, well along the lines of making good stuff, you know what I mean? So, but it's pretty much, it's really the, you know, people ask Kim, and if I didn't already tell you this, you know, they ask him, they're like, how'd you, you know, figure out use those small barrels? And he's like, I just, you know, I couldn't afford it, and that's just what I did. And it turns out that it makes outstanding bourbon. And so here we are 7.5 years later, and people are like, well, as you grow, are you going to start using bigger barrels? And he's like, I can't, because it'll change the product. The product won't be, and it'll take longer to get the same kind of flavor out of it. So if you guys come up and check us out, you know, the difference between our baby barrel and our 3799, it's the exact same 125 proof corn liquor going into the barrel. It's just different size barrel, and you get a very distinct taste between the two, and it's a lot smoother with that small barrel. So
Now, do you do any heavier charring of the barrels? Does that make a difference, or?
it does, it will affect it. We're at a number 4, which is on the higher end. You can go all the way down to, you can go all the way to, you know, uncharred, but then you have to call it a whiskey. But as soon as you char it, they call it like a toast. That's like a light, that's like a 1 to 5 is your kind of your scale. But yeah.
Hey, Jim,
Yep.
is all your barrel aging storage right there at the distillery, or do you have an offsite?
No, we have an off-site location because we have, currently we're at about 1,800 barrels that are aging. And that's a mix of 2.5s, 5s, and 10s. That's a blend of all those together. We have about 200 or so at the distillery. Yes, sir.
Our question, being a small distillery like that, do you have a group of them, or an association, like John said, to rate the different bourbons? In other words, do you have any type of association you belong to of small distilleries?
Not really. It's pretty much just, we're all kind of friends. We've done some events recently where there was a distillery out in, I believe it's near Gibsonia. It's called Lucky Sign Spirits. And they invited all of the basically Western PA distilleries to come out and bring your bourbon and whiskey. And then they opened it to the public and just let people come and taste. So we don't really dislike anybody. We just all kind of get along.
Approximately how many of those independent distilleries are in Western Pennsylvania?
I want to say if you count all the way up to, you know, towards Grove City, like up towards Erie and all the way down Washington, out to Ligonier, there's about 12. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's 7, I think 7 right here in Pittsburgh. There's 3 down in the Strip District. There's 2 in Washington, which that was one of those is Liberty Pole. They actually just moved to the Meadows, like Racetrack Road down there. And then there's us, and then there's, you know, that Lucky Sign that I was saying, and then Grove City's there's 2 up there. There's one called MLH. It's up there. They make a bourbon and stuff. So, but yeah.
You know, in Kentucky, they've got these distilling houses where they put the casks, and I guess the buildings get pretty hot during the summer.
Yes. Yeah.
What impact is the heat on the?
So the more heat you have, the more that wood, the grain, you know, basically the more it opens up, and the more it lets that spirit move in and out of the barrel. That's not something that we have to worry about with the small barrels. We don't want a 60-degree fluctuation, because the more that fluctuation in temperature, the more evaporation and loss you have. But when you're in that standard 52-gallon barrel, they want it to move in and out, so that they do those. Now, I actually the first time I ever went down there was actually just this year. I went down and visited a few of those places, and it's pretty wild to see. They have those big rick houses, they call them, and each one of them houses like 40,000 50-gallon barrels. I mean, it's crazy. And they have, like, we went to one of the most known ones is that Buffalo Trace, and we went there, and they have 13 of those rick houses at 40,000 plus barrels per warehouse. It's 40,000 50-gallon barrels. So they're selling some stuff there, right? Yeah.
I'd like to see Kim McLaughlin lie under those barrels and
Right?
catch the drippings.
Yeah, we're a little smaller than that. We're not to that point yet. We're working on it though. But
Anybody else got any questions? Jim, thank you very much. Appreciate it. That was really interesting.
thank you.
Appreciate it much.
Yeah.